Good evening and welcome to the Assembly of Osteopathic Graduate Medical Educators AOGME webinar series. We're pleased to have you join us for this Academic Careers Roadmap GME Program Pathway webinar. My name is Austin Wetmore. I'm the Program Manager for GME Initiatives at ACOM. I will help facilitate this webinar. Before we get started, I'd like to review a few housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded. The recording will be posted on the AOGME webpage within 7 days. All webinar participants are in listen-only mode. If you experience technical issues during the webinar, please use the chat feature and we will assist you. If you have questions for the presenter during the webinar, please feel free to submit them to the Q&A feature at any time. If time permits at the end of the webinar, Dr. Snyder will respond to your questions. I will now briefly introduce our presenter. Dr. Sandra Snyder is the AOGME Immediate Past Chair and Program Director of the Cleveland Clinic Family Medicine Residency Program. Under her leadership, she and her team established the dually accredited osteopathic program and became one of the first programs in the country to obtain osteopathic recognition. Her team developed a unique osteopathic curriculum that trains allopathic and osteopathic residents together. Thank you again to Dr. Snyder for being with us today and for preparing this presentation. With that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Snyder.
Thank you so much, Austin. I just am grateful to be here today. I know it's a beautiful June day, and I'm grateful for everyone who's viewing today. Today, I want to give an overview of just how to become an academic physician or clinical physician. And I'm kind of coming from the lens of a GME perspective, but also I'm going to cover some undergraduate medical education opportunities too. So to start off with just some of the objectives. So really, wanting to review with you guys just various pathways for a career in GME from a program director's perspective. Really start, I know some people that are in attendance are possible medical students or residents. So really trying to give you tips and tricks of how to develop a career, early on, and what type of experience and skills you need to be successful in an academic career and or clinical faculty. And really, for those of you who might be program directors or faculty, really how do you develop your own faculty, and especially with the lens of osteopathic clinical learning environment. So these are our objectives for today. So to start off, really when you're thinking about an academic career and really trying to kind of go through that discernment, I think you have to think of this as a career that's kind of has a trifecta approach or view. So as an academic, physician or clinical faculty, you're very, skilled in the clinical world, you're skilled in scholarship, you're skilled in education. So those are the three kind of areas that you function in. So I think when you're like going through that discernment of what I want to do with my career, if you're somebody who likes kind of all three of these, arenas, academic medicine is a perfect career for you. So for clinical, so the beginning of, a training for an academic career from a clinical perspective is even as a medical student, as a resident, just really getting gifted in your clinical medicine. So really focusing on, history, physical exam skills, perfecting your physical exam skills, really developing kind of that expertise in your clinical knowledge. And then as you move into, an academic career, often really guiding yourself. So, if you want to be an osteopathic faculty or clinical faculty, really gearing yourself and training yourself up into that. And then sometimes even certain programs or, certain specialties, like for example, throughout my career, I've gotten a little bit more training in intellectual and developmental disabilities patients. So, really that's kind of your, as you're moving towards an academic career, really getting the foundational clinical skills and then expanding on that. Scholarship. So, learning about scholarship is really essential as an academic. Now, a lot of people who go into academic medicine, you don't have to necessarily be an expert in it, but it's learning the process of scholarly activity. So, there are many opportunities of fellowships and research or just getting involved in different types of research. And a lot of times there's different, pathways you can get expertise in. You can get expertise in quality improvement, expertise in just, how to interpret evidence-based medicine, how to do, journal clubs with osteopathic medicine approach. So really, honing those skills as an academic physician. And then the third kind of area that really training in to get expertise is education. So really, learning competency-based education, learning how to give feedback, how to precept, learning programmatic eval. So these are all things, and what we're trying to help with is really getting people in this country who are geared in the osteopathic lens. So this is kind of the foundational three trifecta things to train in an academic career. And then how do you do it? So these are kind of things, and I've actually taken these, the ACGME has a wonderful clinical observer milestones or faculty milestones. So these are actually some of the language that are from these milestones that when I reflect on, you know, choosing an academic career, these are kind of that essential component. So I think the first thing that I really like to talk about is just this reflective practice and commitment to personal growth. I think as you are, trying to become a clinical faculty or an academic, career pathway, just that, that curiosity, that ability to always learn, the ability to kind of grow and seeing kind of, what the needs that you need to grow. And then oftentimes, if you do choose, an academic career in, GME, a lot of times they need certain niches, so they'll need somebody to be like, hey, who can teach, if you're in family medicine, who can teach pediatrics, or some of our surgical colleagues who can do the ultrasound or procedure piece. So sometimes you're actually in academic medicine, you grow into kind of that need. So having this reflective practice and commitment to personal growth is important. And then, really learning, teaching, and facilitating is huge. And there's so many different levels. And, I'll talk a little further about just different resources. And then a higher level is, just, part of education is developing, different types of curriculum. And even if you're, a clinical faculty, you'll have, maybe you're doing a case conference, and you'll need to kind of develop some type of curriculum and then evaluate what you're teaching, if that works. And then a higher level thing is just learning how to do program evaluation. And oftentimes too, in this space, you also need to know some of the regulatory rules. And then I think, the essential part of, an academic career or clinical faculty is really that coaching and mentoring component. If I reflect on my, personal career, it has been full of mentors that have really helped guide me and, push me towards, different areas of just growth, and sometimes seeing in me what I didn't see in myself. So these are kind of the essential components of training for an academic career. So wanted to kind of just further go into kind of reflective practice and commitment to growth. So really that's that piece of really developing yourself and finding resources. So I think a lot of times you think, oh, I'm a medical student, this is or even a first or second year resident. I don't know how to develop myself. Well, there's tons of resources. So really look to, the Optis, our old Opti model, the medical schools. I know we partner very closely with Ohio University Heritage College of Medicine, and our residents get actually a clinical faculty appointment. So these are, great opportunities. And in, developing yourself, developing, first off your clinical self, which is essential, but then, really focusing on, teaching skills and facilitation, because no matter what stage you are at in a medical student, a resident, a faculty, really learning, the fundamentals of feedback. And, feedback is one of those things that you have to, just like with clinical medicine, keep up with, because it does change, and it changes with, generational differences. Working on your presentation skills, a huge component of, medical education, both undergraduate and graduate, is doing tons of presentations. So really, working on those, working on learning, developing a curriculum and curriculum evaluation design. And a lot of people will ask, does it matter where you train, or learn or work, to be, an academic physician or clinical faculty? And I feel the answer is no. I feel like if you have this kind of reflective practice, and commitment to growth, you can really train anywhere. And just from my personal experience, I did my medical school in Athens, Ohio, which is a rural environment. I did, my internship in a small community hospital, that really had no residents. And then I moved on to a community hospital, and now I work for a very large academic medical center. So, I think it's that a reflective practice is the key. It's not necessarily, I trained in a community program, I can never work in academic medicine. I think that's completely wrong. And if you come from this reflective practice, you can work in any environment. And then just some of the resources. So I just wanted to kind of share, just what, and there's tons of different resources, but these, and kind of coming from a lens of, developing yourself as an osteopathic faculty, we have the local OPTI model. So we've partnered with Ohio University. And the kind of the thing that we've done very closely with, our college, is we, in our program, train both osteopathic and allopathic physicians. So we've worked with our college to actually develop courses that will meet our requirements for osteopathic recognition and really help develop ourselves. So it's kind of twofold. So definitely, as you're starting your career, utilizing our colleges of osteopathic medicine. And then as you're moving through your career, really formulating strong partnerships and informing the colleges of, needs and ways to help you build yourself as an academic physician and also, your clinical faculty. And then, we try to train all of our, kind of faculty and, yourself as is you kind of learn this, academic pathway, is just constantly advancing yourself in osteopathic skills. The other place that you can, especially from an osteopathic, component to develop yourself as, kind of an osteopathic clinical educator throughout, are our different state societies. So for Ohio, we have Ohio Osteopathic Association, which has tons of resources. One of my colleagues shared with me this lovely CME center. So there's that opportunity. And it's really nice because, I think as you're beginning your academic career, you can kind of take a little bit of both. You can, do some, online modules. You can read some, see some, online resources and skills of how to do OMM. And then you can actually go to, national conferences and really practice it. So, throughout my career and, as I look at other, people who are on that pathway for a clinical faculty or academic career, going to the AAO is a wonderful experience really to kind of hone in those clinical skills. The ACOFP has tons of opportunities, and I'm sure, I'm unfamiliar with other specialty sites, but I'm sure, our other, osteopathic specialties or other specialties have a lot of training. And then the AOGME. So this past year, we had a wonderful, pre-conference at our national conference of really kind of that precepting and developing, clinical osteopathic skills. So those are essential. And then the other piece, kind of that second part, is you're wanting to go through, an academic, career, even as a clinical faculty. It's really understanding curriculum and programmatic eval. And there's many different ways to do this. So again, you can start early as a medical student. A lot of medical schools, have resources because they have clinical faculty. I'm sure, you can sign up for those, or if you look around, you can find those on, webinars. You can also look, as a resident too in those areas. And then you can look into your hospital systems, to, really see what's available. So I just kind of put some, different, examples, and I'll kind of go through. So, there's an Academy of Clinical Educators. So this is actually through Ohio University Heritage College of Medicine. So again, this is a COM who's offering to clinical faculty, programmatic, things about like how to write goals and objectives, how to develop a curriculum, how to evaluate a curriculum, how to learn competency-based education. Also, learning about programmatic, like learning how do we just started a huge osteopathic recognition. How do we, evaluate that? What are some resources? So these are all things that you can learn through these different types of fellowships. There's one through the Cleveland Clinic that we participated in called the Master Educator. That's another one that you can, find. And it's not just, look, I always recommend look in your areas because all hospitals usually have something or they're affiliated with some type of school to do that. There are fellowships. So if you are interested, people actually do just an academic fellowship. So you can do that after your residency. If for those of you that's not, because that does, sometimes it delays your, entering the workforce. There's tons of fellowships that you can sign up for through like there's STFM fellowships, there's local fellowships, which you can, it's basically having maybe a 2 or 3 weeks per year where you get together with the group and then you do a lot of learning, you do projects, and this can also help you. And then if you're somebody who's really passionate, and thinking like, hey, I might want to, I love this. There's a lot of Master of Education degrees and a lot of workplaces sometimes will support you just like they support physicians getting an MBA. They'll support you getting a Master's of Education. So that's another opportunity if you really want to kind of lean in and learn more curriculum and programmatic eval. And then teaching and facilitating. So this is another space that learning to grow in. And this is another, precepting is huge. And again, I kind of mentioned feedback, that's essential and that's always changing. We used to do kind of the whatever Oreo cookie, and then we did the sandwich model. Now it's like SFED model, and there's another model called Ask Tell Ask. So there's all these different feedback ways to learn. And again, there's a lot of generational differences to learn, but this is a really good piece. And I really feel that if you're a medical student and a resident, this is that space because you guys are constantly, having people under you, you're running busy services, how do you, give feedback? How do you, help your fellow or, intern, if you're a senior resident, how do you help them do a succinct H&P and how do you help them communicate with the family? And there's a whole bunch of, tips and tricks of how to do this. And we have wonderful resources, the AOGME has some resources, the ACOFP, STFM, there's many different resources on feedback. There's a lovely site called teachingphysicians.org. And so this is another space. And again, this is another space, like there is actually just like teaching and facilitating fellowships. Like I did a fellowship while I was still working. And in this fellowship, they actually had somebody come out and watch me teach and watch me precept and then give me feedback on, ways I can improve upon that. So, this is also an area that you can refine and get feedback on. Here's just the site that I thought was just a really good teaching physician site that has just resources. A lot of, schools and hospitals are affiliated with this. Like our faculty through OUHCOM, and we get the ability to go through here and find different resources. This is just an example from, again, our Ohio University College of Osteopathic Medicine. They have these faculty development on demand. And these are available for anyone. So if you're a medical student, if you're a resident, if you're a faculty, you can, go through these and do these whenever you have time. So I think these are great resources. There is another site that is also a free site that I think is really good if you are a resident. This is the Resident as Teachers site, and it's through the Medical College of Georgia. And again, it gives you some cases and ways of teaching and facilitating learning and learning that as you go along. So coaching and mentoring. So I think that's another really piece that, is as you're becoming a clinical faculty or an academic, physician, really mastering. And I think it starts with, often this performance improvement and remediation. This is a space of, when you become an academic physician or a clinical faculty, you're creating competent physicians, and you're needing to protect the public, and you're needing along the way to really help residents learn and grow. And there are, lots of evidence and science to this of how to do competency-based, improvement and remediation. I think for us as an osteopathic profession, this is another space where, learning and developing yourselves, how do you, and I think for educators, often the easiest one to remediate is medical knowledge, often giving different resources to help that resident. Harder ones are often the interpersonal communication, the professionalism piece, even practice-based learning. So really learning that skill set of how to you know approach residents and medical students, and having them move in these different spaces. And it's kind of this, it's almost similar to patient care. It's like you have it depends on that relationship with the learner and how to do this and how to learn this. And then, really kind of focusing on just that coaching and mentoring, a lot of, and I think this is another, thing when people are searching of, that discernment, should I be an academic or clinical faculty? It's that just that relationship and that coaching of helping, bring out the best in our learners, that is very rewarding. And I think, if you've had experience of a great coach or mentor, how are you that to your learner? So I think learning that is something that is a good skill and essential. Mentorship. So one of the things I kind of talked about a little bit earlier is in this, I think becoming a clinical faculty or a academic faculty, it's essential to have mentors. And I have had so many mentors throughout my career, and it's one of those things that there's ways to formally find them, and there's ways to informally find them. And I think too, you often have like different mentors for different areas. So for example, I am an osteopath, and I've trained in the allopathic world. So I do have, a lot of osteopathic mentors who've kind of helped me, guide me in my osteopathic pathway. But I've also have a lot of people in the allopathic world who've really, sat there, and I had my previous program director who I took over his job. I mean, he would sit there and teach me all the different competencies, and we'd read through all the RRC rules. And he made me do, in days of old, we'd have to do this thing called the PIF, which you had to write all of these, learning objectives. And he had me write that, and watched over and like kind of critiqued it. And that's how I learned a lot of kind of that competency based training and learning. AOGME is a really nice organization for mentors. This is, we have the Resident Fellow Council, you have, a bunch of, educators. So it's really nice to do that. Oftentimes too, kind of the formal way of finding mentors is often doing those types of fellowships I was describing. Those fellowships often you get paired with a group. So for example, I did a fellowship to be a program director, and they would have different social activities, and we developed a kind of this collegial group. And throughout my career, I've done tons of projects with this group of individuals who I did a fellowship with. So that's kind of a formal way of doing that. And then I too do think, when you're on your career of where you want to kind of be a clinical faculty in academic medicine, is that discernment, that there is, if you kind of know you want to be academic faculty, you love scholarship, you love education, you love that clinical world and becoming an expert in it. Do you like GME or do you like UME? Because they're completely different group animals. And UME is a little bit slower. GME is definitely a little bit fast paced, but kind of figuring out what space do you like. And, you know, the beauty too is in medical education, I have many of my colleagues who have spent their career in GME and jump over and go into UME and vice versa. So I've unfortunately, or fortunately, I've only spent my career in GME. So I can't really speak to the UME component of flipping over, but there is that opportunity. And then often too, you know, searching for mentors in your educational societies, you know, ACOFP or ACOI, or, you know, those often too, because there's often really great, you know, individuals who are often program directors or have educational expertise and can offer that to you. Um, Pathways for an academic career. So how, you know, right now you're thinking about doing an academic career. Well, basically it's kind of, you just kind of dip your toe in the water and figure out ways of, you know, trying to kind of get more exposure to academic medicine. So, you know, one way that we have really, you know, found is the Resident and Fellow Council. I actually hired one of my faculty. He was the treasurer of the Resident and Fellow Council, and he is just thriving as one of our osteopathic faculty. So this is a really good way of, you know, kind of being in a group, you know, kind of connecting with some members of AOGME who might have be a program director or work in a medical school, and that's a pathway for you. If you have the opportunity to precept at residencies, a lot of residencies have that they're always looking for preceptors, and they often take clinical physicians, and they come in maybe 1/2 day per month. This is a great opportunity because you'll get to kind of, you know, see how, if you like it, you'll kind of get to, you know, practice a little bit with feedback and see how that kind of feels. You know, host medical students for a rotation. That's another wonderful opportunity. There's many medical schools that are out there that really are looking for clinical faculty, and this will give you that opportunity. And also, you know, once you do become a faculty or preceptor for that, you'll open you up to that world of the comms, or, you know, the medical schools with all of the resources to really help develop yourself. And then also teaching at a medical school in residency. You know, there's many of my colleagues and, you know, I myself, they're always looking for kind of preceptors to come in and teach, you know, so they have, you know, sometimes you can just teach a medical class. There's a lot, sometimes humanities, but there's lots of opportunities to, you know, do some teaching, which can kind of open you up to that world. And then pathways for just, you know, then this is kind of that GME perspective for an academic career from a GME perspective. So basically, a pathway is you could be a core faculty or an osteopathic faculty, or there's even, you know, just a clinical faculty. So this is a one way to, you know, and this is kind of is nice because you will often have, you know, clinical duties. You'll maybe, you know, dabble in a little bit of research, and you might have, you know, a small educational component, like you might be in charge of the conferences, or you might be, you know, in charge of procedure curriculum. And then you can move up higher. So then the associate program directors are often, you know, having more training. They begin to develop more of the administrative pieces. So, you know, as an associate program director, oftentimes you'll be in charge of several faculty, several residents, you know, work on, you know, being kind of spearheading some of remediation plans and mentoring people in that, spearheading programmatic plans. And then the, you know, pathway for academic careers, you know, is program director and director of osteopathic education. So in these roles, there's a lot of administrative components, a lot of leadership, a lot of, you know, understanding, like I always say it's somewhat like HR, understanding, you know, academic law and understanding sometimes budgeting. And then too, like there are higher, you know, pieces, there's DIO and, you know, other components, but I figured we can kind of just stick with kind of these three pieces. And then just training, you know, for clinical medicine. So, you know, say you are, you know, wanting to have osteopathic recognition in your program, or you are love, you know, osteopathic medicine, and you want to go into a residency and practice this, you know, basically just, you know, refresh your skills. Like there are many people who have not, you know, have kind of gone to a place and not practice OMT, just refresh it. And if you are somebody who loves osteopathic medicine and wants to start some curricular things, you know, this could be a nice career for you as a core faculty. Um, the ABOFMP is certification. So board certification is not required if you'd want to be a faculty in a residency, but it is recommended, and you can get it through obviously taking the DO boards, or MDs can get it through some of the OR programs. So that is another added piece if you do want to kind of get that training in an osteopathic medical career. If you're on that trajectory, like I had said in kind of the slide earlier, like you're like, hey, I want to go in and I want to be a program director someday, or I really want to be a director of osteopathic medical education. This is where you really need to, and again, for all of this, there are different fellowships like I went through. It's called the NIPID Fellowship. I know the ACOM has SLDP. There's many of these leadership types of fellowships which teach you these skills, to kind of be at that higher, like a program director or a director of osteopathic medicine. You really need kind of administrative skills, because you're, administrating a program, overseeing faculty, accreditation. This is where there's a lot of learning. The accreditation, you need to know like all the GME accreditation, all the board accreditation. We have NRMP accreditation, and even to parallel that, if you're thinking of a medical school career, it's often knowing like COCA and all of those roles. And then definitely, I think in some of these roles is always those leadership skills, because healthcare is ever changing, and if you are a program director or director of osteopathic medical education, you're in this constant, advocacy role of making sure you're getting enough, funding and support and for that education. So it does take a lot of change management. So again, I think from moving to kind of the last kind of objective of just really how do you build faculty? And, I've had this throughout my career, being at the Cleveland Clinic and having a program of osteopathic recognition in a program that is predominantly all MD faculties. It's really been, growing our own. And, we've put searches out for osteopathic, faculty, and it's taken us, 2+ years to get anybody. So I think really if, working on this, developing, your faculty is really just finding those residents who are very interested in teaching, especially osteopathic medicine. Again, I gave you that example of my current faculty was on the AOGME Fellows Council. So that's a nice place to really, kind of foster relationships for future faculty, and then create a robust faculty development. And I think that's huge for what, if I think back of some of our success in our program, is we really focus on doing needs assessment, constantly developing our faculty, really, training them to take on core faculty roles and administrative roles. We're very blessed in our faculty. We have had some donations over the years that we've created a faculty development fund, and we're constantly supporting our faculty in different fellowships to really develop them. So I really think that's important. If you are in in a possible program director or director of osteopathic medicine, or in a residency, of how do you grow your own faculty. And especially in, I do feel some specialties are harder to get some faculty than others, and for those, and especially I think that osteopathic component. And then again, growing your own faculty, just, you want to have your core osteopathic faculty and really having them, participate in faculty development and training them on how to evaluate residents in OPP. I think when you do have, from this is kind of that osteopathic lens, when you do have, other faculty, so we have like in our program predominantly all MDs. Basically, you need to teach them whatever you're teaching, because that's the only way it's going to stick. And, having that faculty development in OMM, we do faculty development once or twice a year. We put our MD, faculty through those same kind of components that we put our residents through, which is very important to do. And then director of osteopathic medical education. So again, I think this is essential. I think we need more directors of osteopathic medical education for our osteopathic recognition. And, really that training is kind of, again, just like the academic pathway, but more of a lens of the osteopathic. So, really working on curricular design and evaluation from an osteopathic lens. Like, how do you create a longitudinal, osteopathic curriculum? How do you design it and how do you evaluate that osteopathic curriculum? How do you develop more osteopathic faculty? How do you develop, say you have a resident who you do an OSCE in their second year and they fail it or they don't perform as well. What is your plan to keep them up to speed? So learning that, and then administrative roles. And I do think too, it is essential to, some know some of that budgetary administrative roles, knowing something about budgets, because it is, these are, especially the director of osteopathic medical education is a higher, FTE, and there are some resources you need. So just making sure that you understand kind of that cost and how to, advocate to budget that in. So that is kind of my summary. So I'd love the opportunity. And, I'm always available if you guys ever had any questions to reach out about anything, of your path, career path and academic medicine. I'm always open to any types of questions. But I think I would like Austin, I think he had some maybe questions that he
Yeah,
would.
if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A feature, and then we can answer them live. We had a few pre-registering questions. So Dr. Snyder, what led you to become a program director? And was that always your anticipated or intended career path, or did something really just like spark your interest in it at some point in your career?
Yeah, that's a great question. So actually, I was not on a trajectory to be a program director. So I actually did had a practice when I graduated from residency in my home, like the town adjacent to my hometown. So I had a wonderful practice, about 3,000 patients. So very, very big and very busy practice. So at the time when I had this practice, it was probably 2 or 3 years into my career, and the Lerner College of Medicine, which is the Cleveland Clinic's College of Medicine, started. So they had asked if I would be like a clinical preceptor. So I started out, I was like, oh yeah, this would be great. So, I got involved and I did some uh, whatever work or development through their school. And then I took on students. So I would have like the same student every week for 2 years. And then at the same time, there was a research fellowship that I signed up for. And I worked with a group and we were doing some practice based research. So I was probably 2 or 3 years into my career and I get called into my boss's office. And of course, my residents probably feel the same way. I get called, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm in big trouble. And I was like, oh, so I go in, and my boss, who happened at the time, he was our chair of family medicine, but his previous career was he was actually a program director in family medicine. So I remember coming to, his office and thinking I'm going to get in trouble. And he basically kind of showed me a couple of things. Like he showed me, like, I got accepted to some research, like the AFP research assembly for one of my presentations, and he had like my teaching scores, and he's like, what do you see? And I was like, I guess I'm doing well. I didn't know what to say at that point. And he's like, no, 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 I see a program director. He's like, you have, like my clinical scores and everything. He's like, you have that skill set to be a program director. And I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, he was like, where is this coming from? I had never ever thought of that. And I remember even walking out of the room and talking to one of my really good friends at the clinic. And I was like, can you believe that he thinks this of me? And she's like, oh, you are totally a program director. And fast forward 10 years later, I became the program director. So that is kind of how I became where I am today. And I think that's where that big component of mentorship and coaching is essential.
That's awesome. So we just had a question come in through the Q&A feature. You mentioned how generational change in medical student, or you mentioned generational change in medical students and residents. How has your precepting style and giving feedback changed over the years?
Yeah, so it's changed a lot, you know. So like if you think about like baby boomers, they only want feedback once a year. They like that's why we have in our institution APRs. You know, Gen X is a little different. Millennials are, you know, definitely needing that stating the feedback and really, you know, working on, you know, I think in that generation we had tried the sandwich model. Now the new generation for Gen Z, it's really kind of, and you know, and it's not like I think there's good to this because I do think you know, kind of the way like I trained with feedback, like you didn't know if it was feedback or not. So I think that this is actually a better way of training, but it's basically, you know, really trying to ask the learner like of where what they want to work on. So like what is your goal for the day? And really trying to have the learner pull out like what are their strengths for their session and trying to you as the observer supporting their strengths. And so if you're watching somebody saying like, hey, you did a really good job today of setting the agenda, establishing the rapport, you know, kind of collaborating with what they feel their strengths are, and then working on really um, figuring out what are the areas that they need to learn and grow. You know, what are areas in like formative feedback in their session, and then supporting them. And then if there are, you know, areas that you as the preceptor feel that the resident or learner needs to improve upon, you know, bringing that up to them in a safe space and then coming together and working on a plan. So, you know, an example would be you might be precepting a resident who you noticed is not really asking anything about the social history and smoking, and they have a diabetic, you know, who is smoking and they didn't bring that up. So trying to kind of ask them like, hey, I noticed that you didn't bring this up. Why aren't you bringing this up? Is how can we work together and help you bring that up. So it's coming from, it's kind of, you know, defining expectations, going from a path of strengths, you know, coming from a path of where we need to grow, and then coming together and creating a plan together that the learner can grow. So that's where we kind of are in the current feedback place. But yes, it is because I, you know, in my workplace too, we have four generations. So I still have lots of baby boomers in my faculty, and we have Gen X and millennials, and we find a lot of sometimes the stressors is just that we have different forms of feedback. So really kind of understanding that and then defining what is the best way.
And then kind of going off of the generational changes, what did you think when you were a medical student being a clinical educator would entail, and have those expectations changed now?
Um, you know, it's very interesting because I never thought I was just like being a clinician. I never really thought I would be an educator until my mentor um said something. Now, granted, I think my training, so when I trained, I was actually the first class. So for my third and fourth year of medical school, we were the only, so as a third year medical student, we were it. Like we were in a new hospital that just started GME. So there was six of us and there was no residents, and the attendings were predominantly allopathic attendings. And this was, you know, in 2000, and we were osteopaths. So there was still a little bit of tension at that time between MDs and DOs. So we as students really had to teach and teach ourselves and learn, and like we became teachers because we didn't have that layer of residence. So I think I just kind of innately learned that, but I never thought when I was going to graduate that I was going to be a clinical educator. So I thought I was going to be a clinician. And then I think it was just dipping my toes into these different waters, like, that it was an opportunity. They started a new medical school and they're like, hey, who wants to precept? And I kind of raised my hand and got a student. And then somebody's like, hey, do you want to try some practice-based research? And I kind of was like, sure, I'll try it. And I think it was that too. I think it was like getting myself into these other two worlds and then realizing like, wow, I really love research. Wow, I really love education. Wow, I really love clinical medicine. What is a job that I can do all three and be very happy? And then that's when I and then, having this mentor be like, wow, like you can do this. And that's when I was like, you know what, I'm going to do this. And then now looking back, thank goodness, because I have had, tremendous career satisfaction in this pathway.
And then, so does residency program type, such as like community-based, university affiliated, or like a large university academic center, does that impact fellowship and academic career opportunities later on?
I would say no. I think it's ultimately the person, because I know a lot of people that um, are in these different settings, and a lot of times they don't take advantage. Like they might say be in a high resource, academic medical center with tons of things, but they don't take advantage of it. And then you might have somebody in a community thing that also doesn't take advantage. I think it's more on that person and their wanting to learn and grow in these different areas and searching for the opportunities and getting those opportunities is what I think is the most success, because you can be in a very resource rich area and not take advantage and do anything with the resources, um and it wouldn't change somebody. I think the person who might come from a very small resource low community program who is searching everywhere connects with resources, free resources through all these different national and different organizations, and really develop themselves, can out perform that person in that academic highly resourced area. So it's really, I feel, and this is my personal kind of opinion, I really feel it's on that person, and it's searching for it. It's every, I think it's just in residency is hard. It's, you're trying to survive. But if you want to, once a year just search for something to develop yourself, you can find that throughout your community.
Is there a recommendation for where to find like job listings for academic career positions in GME? Or like any suggestions that you have?
Yeah, so I mean, I think a lot of times, there are, if you look in the specialty, different organizations, like for us in academic family medicine, the Society of Teachers of Family Medicine has journals that people will put ads in, and there's tons of academic jobs. Sometimes just, I've had people who have reached out to me, like, look, if like, say, hey, you want to, for example, someday work at the Cleveland Clinic's Family Medicine residency. I've had people who've just emailed me and have said, hey, like, I am highly interested in an academic career. When a position opens up, can you send me the link? And I have done that. So I think you can look, nationally and different websites for different organizations. But I do think, that personal connection. And again, too, like I do think some of these kind of informal, like, the AOGME and, some of these informal groups, STFM, ACOFP, when you kind of sometimes go to some of these, venues, you do get to connect with people who, you both might want to work together in the future.
And then we had a question about when is it best to start an academic career? So like right after residency, or maybe like after getting more clinical practice experience, like later down the road, or does it matter?
I think it doesn't matter. I think it just depends on like where you are. I think it just depends what type of kind of your clinical acumen, like how where you are clinically, and just who you are as a person. Because I have had, for example, my APD, who is actually probably going to retire in 2 years. He actually never left. He did his residency at our residency and stayed since, and he's been there for 35 years, and he's had an outstanding career and nothing, you know, he's done fabulous. I think there are other people that sometimes feel that they need to go out maybe for 2 or 3 years just to get kind of their confidence and that they can do this, and then they come back. I have had another colleague of mine that had just kind of stayed in academic medicine right from her residency graduation, and she was phenomenal. Like I respect her and adore her, but I think she actually stepped out of academic medicine and went into clinical medicine because she felt like she never had that experience and she wanted to feel like she was a clinical person. So I really feel like it depends kind of on that more of that person's inner like confidence in kind of what they want. But I think I have seen both ways, and I think it's equally successful. I like told you my career path. I wasn't sure that I wanted to do this. I actually wanted to be a clinician, and so that's why I jumped in. But I feel if I knew like from day one I was committed to it, I would have stayed, and it would have been fine. And a lot of times too, to answer this too, like, and I do this as a program director, like my junior faculty who we just hire on, we keep them very clinical, because we really get them 2, 3 years and we give them a clinical buddy and so we really get them. And then the beauty too is like we develop them. Like if we find like, oh, you know what, like we do inpatient peds and their residency didn't have inpatient peds, so let's do some more faculty development, and we could even have them spend a week with another attending on the inpatient peds together and learning those skills. So it's also too sometimes in your program will help you gain that confidence and maybe a little bit more experience that you potentially might have missed if you were a clinical physician for 2 years.
So we had a question come in through the Q&A. So it says, while I recognize growing efforts by many institutions to promote well-being among their faculty, achieving a healthy balance can be challenging. I'm very interested in your perspective on work-life balance in academia, especially related to its often inherently demanding schedules and high-pressure scenarios related to deliverables, innovation, the attainment of personal, program, and institutional goals.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and this is always, I think, a good point that I always bring up too, because I do feel that people try to enter academic medicine who are clinically burned out. And I try to always explain to people that academic medicine is as hard as clinical medicine, and sometimes I think even harder, just because you're dealing with learners and there's a lot of you're like in the middle of things. You have your learners, you have faculty, you have the constant pressures above to perform and metrics, etc. So it is a very challenging world, but I think it's getting to the why you do it. And I think for me, the why is I just the learners are my everything. They are our future. I get tons of passion in it. And so I think it's really just trying to, model that wellness and creating, a good team around you, and, having that ability, like in clinical medicine, letting go of things and, having good boundaries. And, for my residents, I'm available, but I'm not available when I'm 2 weeks away on vacation. And, really just trying to set those boundaries. And it's, I think it's wellness in, is an issue occurring everywhere. It's a systemic problem, and I don't have, the best answer, but I think for me, I just go back to the why. I try to set good boundaries. I just hire a really good team. And I do think too, like the beauty of academic medicine is that we are wanted. So I feel like if you're in a space where it is toxic and you're working tons of hours, go somewhere else. That's the beauty for us is you can maybe do some medical school, maybe, get out of that space. But I really feel that it's just trying to get back to your why, trying to develop a team, trying to model wellness and set good boundaries, are some of the thoughts to help with burnout.
And then just one final question. So, from a program leadership perspective, in rural residency programs where it's difficult to attain or maintain core faculty, how can non-core faculty help with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's it's just getting that desire of getting that those individuals who have that desire to teach and training them up, and really fostering them and developing them. I mean, the other piece of my career is I've worked a lot on this longitudinal curriculum for medical school, um, and with OUHCOM called the TCC. And we actually have our interprofessional faculty. So we have our pharmacists, our nurses, our APPs, and our PAs, and our social workers. They're actually teachers for the medical students. And, we took these individuals and train them. So we got a Macy's grant, and we trained them to be clinical faculty, for our students. So I do think, and that's, kind of that whole piece of with academic medicine is really, trying to have your non-clinical or preceptors, even using interprofessional team to train people up. For the people that are not core faculty, trying some type of faculty development. And, for that, you often have to, like we have, like in ours, we always joke, we have like one of our faculty who like goes around and brings donuts and like we'll meet with faculty at lunch, or sometimes going out to them and trying to engage them, trying to build relationships with them, trying to have them sometimes see the value of training. Some of these people will be your future practice partners, trying all those different things. But yeah, it is a challenge, and I think it's become even more in the last 5 years a challenge, just because of just a lot of the clinical pressures that are on the healthcare system. And you get individuals that sometimes the last thing they want to do is teach. And I think it's trying to just engage them and do the best you can.
Thank you so much, Dr. Snyder, for this great presentation and all you do for AOGME. And thank you to all who joined us. If you have any questions, please contact us directly at aogme@acom.org. This concludes our webinar. Thanks again to everyone who joined us, and have a great evening.
Thank you.